Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of Deep Space Nine in the order they were broadcast. Tonight's episode is By Inferno's Light, and this is Chris in South Carolina.
And this is Blair from Ontario, Canada.
And this is Matt in Buffalo.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. I had to remember that what it was there for a minute. My mind is still on vacation, but we are all back together again after a few weeks of being apart, and we're discussing the exciting conclusion to the two-parter from last week. We did In Purgatory's Shadow, and now we're going to finish up with By Inferno's Light. So without further ado, let's get into it. Synopsis. The crew tries to defend the Alpha Quadrant from the invading Dominion fleet. Meanwhile, Worf, Garrick, and the other prisoners prepare to escape from the Dominion internment camp. This is the 15th episode of Season 5, first aired on February 17th, 1997, written by Ira Steven Behr and Robert Hewitt Wolf, and it was directed by Les Landau. Guest stars this week include Andrew J. Robinson as Garrick, Mark Alimo as Gul Dukat, Melanie Smith as Tora Zial, J.G. Hertzler as Martok, James Horan as Ikatika, unknown performers as perfunctory prisoners, and Leslie Hoffman as someone other than B'Elanna's stunt double for a change. That lovely intro was provided by Chris. So, Chris, whenever you're ready, take us into the second half of this exciting duology By Inferno's Light.
Man, it is exciting. I threw in that B'Elanna stuntwoman thing just for you, that bit of trivia, Matt. That was in honor of our sister mother show. Is it our mother show?
I mean, previous incarnation of this show.
All right. So we get our last time on DS9 opening as per usual with some of these second run episodes. And then we get down to the nitty gritty. The Dominion are coming through the wormhole fast. Battle stations are manned, and even Dukat is on the welcoming committee. Except he took that euphemism a little more seriously than we thought. And he's been doing backdoor negotiations with the Dominion for a while now. Kira makes the call to blast Dukat to the high heavens. Unfortunately, he's gone too quickly as we break to opening credits.
So, having just come back from Vegas a week ago, I had the privilege of seeing Ira Steven Behr talk about DS9 several times. And he had mentioned that he was getting a little uneasy with the fact that people, like our erstwhile Melissa, were getting enamored with Gul Dukat and kind of sympathizing with him. And he always wanted Dukat to maintain his edge, and he wanted to take the opportunity to remind people that, you know, he may have had points here and there, but this is a man who still oversaw the death of millions of people. And so by making him back into the villain again, that's what he was hoping to do, was to take that that unexpected sympathy that some people had built up for him and just turn it completely, like twist the knife, so to speak.
I would argue, I agree with that. And for me, it wasn't sympathy. I just started enjoying the character, and I enjoyed him working with the team. So for me, it was kind of a piss off that he went back to the dark side again, but it was fantastic. It needed to be done. But I remember at the time it was, oh, come on, just when I starting to like the guy.
But it is completely within the character.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it is cool because so often you might think this is going to be a redemption story of him. And no, we're not going to go down that road with him. And the more you think about it, why should that character ever deserve a redemption story? Truly an awful person, and it's good that they do remind you of that.
Yep.
I mean, just I love just the shock that Kira and the rest of them have with the fact that Cardassia is joining the Dominion.
Did anyone see that coming, though, first time around?
I mean, I can't say because I saw these out of sequence, so I knew Cardassia was joining the Dominion at some point. What did you think, Blair?
Yeah, just... after everything they'd gone through, it's
because he was being. I mean, you weren't on last week either, were you?
Oh, I missed last week as well.
So you and I weren't on, but like we both have seen, obviously, In Purgatory's Shadow, and he's being really pushy about getting Zial off the station, and he's acting weird. So did that play to you when you first aired, or did you think it was him being an overprotective father?
being the overprotective father for sure. Totally missed that. Didn't see it coming. And similar to the crew, they were a little dumbfounded as well. And I like that. But yeah, just it's as with Gul Dukat, the Cardassians are these people that they keep doing it to themselves. You just keep hating these people.
I mean,
And then what happens in the end of the series, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's hard to, of course, I don't advocate racism in any way, but it's hard to find someone like O'Brien's feelings on the Cardassians entirely without merit when they keep displaying this kind of behavior.
Yeah. I guess what I would equate it to, Matt, is kind of how you and Smonsky sometimes view Southerners, my kin folk, rightly and wrongly at times.
Well,
that's not entirely fair, Chris.
And Chris, maybe you don't want to bring that up after this weekend.
Hey, I'm not in Virginia, brother. We're doing that in South Carolina.
No, but it's your fellow Southerners.
Hey.
Oh, the guy was an Ohioan.
Yeah. Let's just keep it moving. Let's keep it trucking, guys, on that front. Back on the prison asteroid, and the prisoners are trying to figure out Tane's communication machine. Garrick is the chosen one to utilize it because he's got all them Cardassian sneaking skills. But they get a call to assemble from the Vorta that runs the camp. The Cardassians, all Cardassian prisoners, are being released, except for Garrick, of course, and we all know why. And speak of the devil, Dukat addresses all the people across all the galaxy about his new alliance and what will be our first clip.
You might ask, should we fear joining the Dominion? And I answer you, not in the least. We should embrace the opportunity. The Dominion recognizes us for what we are, the true leaders of the Alpha Quadrant. And now that we are joined together, equal partners in all endeavors, the only people with anything to fear would be our enemies. My oldest son's birthday is in 5 days. To him and to Cardassians everywhere, I make the following pledge. By the time his birthday dawns, there will not be a single Klingon alive inside Cardassian territory, or a single Maquis colony left within our borders. Cardassia will be made whole. All that we have lost will be ours again, and anyone who stands in our way will be destroyed.
I really love that scene because, first of all, it's just a cool way to tie together different scenes to show that this is showing on Cardassia and that there are some Cardassians that are like, yeah. And then to take us into the next scene where they want to take us, which is, of course, our crew's reaction to this whole thing.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's a really nice little transition.
Can I just say, though, I mean, I know we try to not stray into politics too often, but I got to say, watching this episode and listening to that speech in light of recent American politics has really made this episode take on a whole new meaning than it did in 1997.
Yeah, it's quite prescient. And there's another really prescient conversation that is the second clip that I chose. So I would agree with that. Yeah, it's a little scary.
Just that the kind of tactics that Dukat is using, the rhetoric that he's pushing. I mean, he does everything except say "Make Cardassia great again," which is essentially the underlying message of that address.
Right, and I think the even more direct comparisons are stuff like North Korea, but where you see these kind of propaganda, boisterous nonsense, chest thumping kind of politics and that. And the thing is, it's like they do that kind of stuff in TV shows like this for you to recognize it before it gets to extremes like North Korea, and you can kind of see it in everyday kind of politics, and kind of you're trained now to kind of look for that and kind of be alarmed by it, I would hope. And that's what this is playing to. And yeah, it's prescient, like it unfortunately is all the time, and it doesn't have to be to the extremes like North Korea. It could be everyday politics.
Yeah, I know, but the scary thing is, and I'll get off this topic, but when you associate it with North Korea and you associate it with Cardassia, we're always so used to associating with the other, with that kind of rhetoric and that kind of leadership with, other people. The fact that it's infecting our politics now is really scary. And the fact that the language used is eerily similar.
Yeah, the language is a problem, but there have been, I mean, we're not going to delve deep into this tonight, but I think that the rhetoric is coming out, but this type of sentiment and the things that have been going on in politics since as long as I can remember in recorded history, there's always been some level of questionability to it. And so when you get a big giant government, you have issues like this.
Not to
so
this.
I think to say that this is more scary than, the time where we were taking over the Americas, where we were stretching our legs into the far reaches of America. I mean, there have been terrible, awful leaders who've done terrible, awful things for a long, long time.
Sure, there have,
but to keep that in view, I think.
Of course, but you always hope that you learn from history and you learn from past mistakes, and
right.
Clearly we haven't been. But let's move on. But it was just
Absolutely.
It was interesting to watch this episode now versus all the times I watched it before.
Yeah, definitely makes you feel something.
Before we move on, though, I feel terrible saying it, but they do a really effective job, and I guess it comes up a little bit later, but they really do an effective job of showing the horrible, tight, claustrophobic space that Garrick has to go into. And they point out early on that it was Tane going in there. Did anyone else kind of have a suspicion that Tane physically would not have been able to fit into there?
That's my first thought was, man, I couldn't fit in there. I know Tane ain't fitting in there. What are they playing at here?
Well,
yeah, all right. I wasn't the only one then. I don't feel as bad.
No, but I mean, whatever. He's dead.
Right.
See it.
It was a quick passing thought, but it did take me out for a moment.
Yes, but the whole point, the whole point was it didn't matter what, how big the size was. Only one person could fix that, and that's why it had to be Garrick. But absolutely, I don't know. Maybe he pushed a few wires aside in the gut area so he could sneak in.
It had to be a tight area too for what happens to Garrick, I think, in the episode. So, I mean,
yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean size either, right? To be claustrophobic, just to know you're in a tight space. Whereas
closed in,
right? Whereas we may feel, hey, it's nice and spacey in here. Others, just the fact that they know they're closed in and they can't get out until the coast is clear. That causes a lot of anxiety amongst a lot of people. So
I'm gonna go out on a guess here. Blair, do you love the movie The Great Escape?
I love the movie The Great Escape. Fantastic.
I knew you would. Just direct Charles Bronson parallels here with the tunneling out claustrophobia kind of moment.
Yeah, no, I never thought about that. Yeah, I'm glad. And they're on a rock planet where they're digging out, I guess, right? So,
yeah,
great analogy.
Great Escape is a great movie. I love it.
Well, back to our story. The crew are discussing the sabotagery that went down, and Julian suggests they should bring back some blood screenings. Everybody looks at him a little funky because that's a little weird. Why are we jumping to changelings all of a sudden? It's because Julian's a military genius. So Cisco orders all the above plus some extras. And then we move on to Garrick, who's working on this engineering feat when they suddenly have some visitors. They're here to collect Worf for some good old-fashioned fight sports. Worf goes to town. Meanwhile, his fellow prisoners are waiting to safely pull Garrick from behind the wall, and when he's finally released, his pulse is racing. He claims he's ready to go back in, but Julian's not so sure. He sets up a regimented schedule so that they can check his vital signs. Worf continues to kick ass, though, but it turns out this was the least of the warriors. Worf takes a deep breath.
Yeah, this is the stuff that, problems with Worf aside in the past, this is the kind of stuff that he gets on DS9 that I like.
This is really good stuff. In fact, by the end of this episode, I feel like almost like Worf is redeemed here, because especially Smonsky and I were talking about it last week when you guys were not here, about the little spat that they have and how bad of a taste we had in our mouth because of all that stuff that happened in the
Ryza
one episode, the Ryza episode. And so we couldn't even, like, it's hard to even find the good in that scene, and there's not very much good in that scene anyway, but it's hard to even find the good in that scene because you're just so turned off by their relationship because of that other episode. So yeah,
But
this is
the
definitely a
Worf you
redemption moment.
remember,
This
though, at
episode.
least.
This is what you want to see.
DS9 Worf to me. So yeah, and
Yeah.
and I agree with what you guys were saying, like the whole scene from last week. Yeah, that whole Rice episode just, it's going to take a lot. If for you guys, you won't even, forgive them for that. But this scene and these episodes really kind of, I like the Worf character for this.
And Matt, you might agree with me, but I don't think it's any coincidence that Worf starts to get better now that Martok is into the picture, the real Martok.
Oh yeah, the real Martok's great. And just regarding the fight stuff, it's just, is this more like potentially cliched, hacky science fiction writing? Is that just death battle sports in a prison between aliens? That sounds like that could be just really awful, but this is where the Worf character is awesome in this instance. And yeah, he has the Rocky coach in his corner, kind of having
good.
his back here, Gowron, or not Gowron, Martok. And yeah, they make just an awesome couple. Martok is the best Klingon that we ever really see more than an episode or two of. He's great, and he buoys Worf's character, which I think has been on the ropes, if we're keeping the fighting analogy going.
Yeah, but
his character was bad recently.
But this is like, when I think of Worf on DS9, this is the stuff that I remember that makes me like his stuff here more than his stuff on TNG.
Absolutely. And Martok, just going back to him, he's an honorable Klingon. Like, we always hear about these honorable Klingons that are completely deceitful and corrupt and whatnot. But, to me, this is, watching this episode or the last two episodes, it's like, finally, we get Martok back in the picture. And this, and we keep saying it, but we say, well, this is where DS9 gets really good. And this is another one of those episodes where DS9 gets really good. But I would have loved to have seen Martok have a bucket with a sponge in it, and sponging him off as he
Vaselining up his eyebrows.
Yeah.
All too often, the Klingons, what I've always argued is they come off as like complete posers and fakes and all that, and just cheesy bravado. Somehow, Martok actually has a certain credibility, weight, gravitas to him, where it's actually quite genuine in my mind that this is what the Klingon should be, and maybe a lot of actors can't pull it off for whatever reason, but he does. And this is where you've always wanted the Klingons to have this kind of actual real weight and presence to them, and also often they just don't.
Well, and also too, they let Martok be a character. They gave him actual like foibles, and there's going to be that one episode later this season where he's reluctant to ride his crew into battle because of what happened here on the prison planet. So I like that they make him a different kind of Klingon. He's still boisterous. He's still a Klingon's Klingon when he wants to be, but he's a lot more complex than some of the other ones we've seen.
Well, the boisterous part then feels earned because he's not just a caricature; he's an actual character, and it makes the highs better when you see him. Low isn't necessarily always right for him, but you see him humble around it. Yeah,
I would argue the word is humble.
There are nuances to his character where a lot of Klingons just hit those high notes.
Absolutely.
Smonsky, I want to circle back to what you said about the cliche, because you were absolutely right that this could have fallen into cliche, hacky junk, and the Klingon, specifically Worf and Martok, saved that to some extent. But I think we have to give some credit to the Jem'Hadar as well and how they've been built up, because they seem like a legitimate threat. And so when you see Worf go in there against them, you're like, dang, what's going to happen? Yeah. There's a little more balance to it there too. So I think they've just done a really good job on that end.
It's not just 7 and 9. It's not just 7 and 9 fighting the Rock,
which was awesome.
No, it wasn't.
It was pretty cool. The Rock with the Romulan eyebrows.
Did he hit her with a rock bottom or not in that episode?
Yes, he did. He
think
did.
he
Of
did,
course
yeah.
he did.
That's how he ended it.
It's so great, man. God, he's done the rock bottom in quite a few of his movies, and it's always fun. My favorite of which was in The Rundown. If you haven't seen that little action piece, it's probably his most fun movie to date.
Right. I also like this Jemadar. I do like in this episode, the leader one, played by James Horan, who has been in other Star Trek. I don't know how well you guys remember the second part of Descent from TNG, but he's the security officer that's real snooty that to the younger ensign about her calculations with the sun.
And he also plays the tax character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Troves of trivia, you guys. Well, we're back on the station, and we're going to queue up our next clip because Kira is meeting with Ziyal on the promenade. Chose a bunch of real short clips for Smonsky this week.
Wonderful.
View's even better from Upper Pylon 2.
Well, what?
Hoping that the
Woohoo! The view is
I isolated that, by the way. It's in the sound bites folder if you're editing and you want to throw that anywhere.
all right. Am I editing this week?
No,
I am.
but I can.
Is it you, Matt? Oh, okay,
Yeah. Actually, what I could do is I could make that a bumper that attaches to our opening intro, where it's like the view's even better from Upper Pylon 2, and then it goes into our theme.
good. Ooh, I like it.
But even when he did something bad, he had a good reason. Everyone has their reasons. That's what's so frightening. People can find a way to justify any action, no matter how evil. You think my father's evil? I think you can't judge people by what they think or say, only by what they do.
All right. Beyond this being the best Ziyal
I was gonna say, did
in
you,
the entire universe.
did you guys
we mentioned it
talk
last
about that last week? Is 'cause I like Melanie Smith. This is the best iteration of Ziyal.
No argument from any person that's thinking about anything.
It's the first time she's a character,
Yeah,
practically.
with feelings and emotions, and she's fully fleshed out.
And she feels more or less age appropriate now.
Yeah,
Well, age appropriate to what? That was a big argument that we had last week.
they're not in love with. She might be in love with Garrett, but he's not in love with her.
They have feelings for each other. I think they're both infatuated with each other and they depend on each other. But at the same time,
Infatuated in different ways.
at the
I'm
same
infatuated with my daughter, but that doesn't mean I love her.
at the same time, though, like I appreciate how, you know, if we're being generous, this Ziyal is being played as like a 20 or 21-year-old, and versus the 15 or 16-year-old we've seen in the past.
Yeah. We won't beat the dead horse. Smonsky and I really did dig in on this one last week quite a bit. But I really love this conversation. I love what Kira says. I think that it is really beautiful stuff. It's like probably some of the best writing these guys have done, if not a little too heavy-handed. But I kind of like it in this instance. That I think the heavy-handedness is appropriate for what we're going through right now.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a very heavy episode. There's lots going on.
Well, I'm not bothered by the heavy-handed nature of it. You're trying to talk to somebody who's trying to see through the bias of their father being the Hitler analogy in this universe. And to kind of break through that, you have to kind of get pretty heavy-handed with somebody. So even in the context, or, you know, in the context, it works pretty well. But then if you look at it from the outside, it's still not too bad. She has a lot of wisdom in her comments to her.
Yeah.
Kira, speaking to Ziyal, that is.
I just love this statement because I've been kind of dealing with this argument. Like this whole thing kind of jumped up in my head when I was listening to Kira say this. Because Thomas Jefferson is one of those like heroes of history, quote unquote, right? Like you learn about him in elementary, or we learned about him in elementary school. It's like this great paragon of virtue and philosophy and truth and dignity and all this thing. But like today in the current zeitgeist, there's this whole that like everybody wants to talk about the 600 slaves he owned in his lifetime. And we have to deal with that though his words were these great ideas and ideals that have led us to a place where we're currently striving for even more freedom and even more like pressing that out further. But he was still a man who his actions weren't,
Right.
and you have to deal with that as a person who wants to buy into what he said. You have to still deal with.
Yeah. None of your idols are perfect.
Right. And he probably shouldn't be an idol for that reason, like you should look at him as a whole human and see that he was faulty and that we have to push even further than he thought he could have pushed at that time.
It's too bad people aren't ready or able to look at things as a nuanced shades of gray. Everything has to be to the extremes one way or the other. And that's just not what people are built to understand or want to, because it's challenging and it's not easy.
I hope that in the podcast age, like that people sneak it in there, like you can, it's unfortunate in some ways because you can kind of develop, like you can just listen to Ben Shapiro every week and then you're going to be ruined. Right. But if you listen to Ben Shapiro and Pod Save America and, then you get a much more nuanced, well-rounded view of what's actually going on. You can see things from multiple perspectives and
Sadly,
ideas.
that's not how it works, though. People find echo chambers.
I know.
There's terms for it, man. They find their nuance because they don't like being challenged.
Be challenged, people. I want
Yes,
everybody to go be challenged. Be challenged this week. When you don't want to be challenged, watch wrestling. Are we ready to move on?
If sometimes you just want to boo the Indian guy, watch wrestling, right?
They're going to have to change that, though. We won't have a wrestling podcast in the middle of this Star Trek podcast, but they're going to have to change that.
Sometimes I wish we would.
So, meanwhile, the Klingons have arrived. Gowron wants to dock. Sisko grants him access, but he's fearing the worst. Gowron gives Sisko some intel. It's time to turn tail, gather resources, and prepare for battle at home is what he thinks he should do. Sisko suggests maybe they should revive these old Khitomer Accords, and Gowron kind of likes that idea at this moment.
But holy crap. Hold on. How does Sisko not get a promotion this week? I know he just like poisoned a couple planets and
but he just restored the Khitomer Accords.
Yeah, he chased the Bajorans away from the Federation, but he, saved two empires from going to war with each other again. He single-handedly got the Klingons
single-handedly
back.
does all that, and then at
like
the end brings in a whole nother group, right? Like we'll talk about that when we get there. But
I do like Gowron's little comment about how 5 years ago no one had ever heard of Bajor or Deep Space Nine, and all of a sudden all these important things are happening here.
That's a great segue, Matt, because we're going to end this little section here with where the tides of fortune take us, no man can know. But those are tricky tides, as Julian creepily watches in the background. So that's kind of the back and forth that Sisko and Gowron have, and it's fantastic. It's a great little back and forth.
I think it's almost an homage to those that have stuck around DS9 so long, and this is the reason why you stuck around. And when this first spin-off came about, no one was giving it a chance, and now
it's definitely a double entendre. Yeah, it both works in the episode and as real life commentary for the fans that stuck with it.
I mean, but like I think it's finally time for them to. It's okay for them to point out that we're doing more universe building things for this Star Trek universe than TNG or even Voyager ever did.
Mm-hmm.
But just in that scene, by the way, it's kind of a funny little thing. Like, why would a doctor be a weaseling into this conversation between?
It was weird.
But then you kind of realize it. Yeah, but it works though. In that changeling to roll his plan into place would be trying to like goose this.
Get the Klingon fleet here.
Yeah. So it works in that he would try to weasel himself in if he thought there was a little bit of a rift forming between the two. He'd come in and try to push them back together for a moment.
And the actor played it really well too. Or the actor, Sadig El Fadil,
Alexander Sadig
played it really well. He he was standing back there looking so creepy, man. But nobody
He
was
plays
watching.
it. He plays it well until he no longer has to maintain the character, and then he goes into silent Rayo Vantica mode
I
a
was
little
about to
bit.
say Silent Rayo Vantica. He's
I,
big
I do
movements.
I do like his non-reaction right before he dies, quote unquote.
Oh, that was terrible. It's like he was just channeling Terminator 2, just like wasn't he?
Yeah.
He
Just
had
like-
just watched it. He watched the 2,000 death,
Yeah,
like
yeah, he was
3,000 death, like
he
4,000 times.
he turns into Robert Patrick by the end of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy got zany in his old age. He did a great
Oh,
movie with
he
John
even does
Cena.
he even does the voice changing, just like
Yeah.
the T-1000 or whatever.
He totally ripped that. Anyway, back to Worf. He's laying waste, folks. We find that he's won 5 in a row, but he also has 5 broken ribs to show for it. And his body just can't take much more punishment. But Worf is ready to die. He'll never yield.
And Matt, this is the kind of like boisterous Klingon stuff that I like when Martok is like 5 challenges and 5 victories. What hero of the Empire, blah, 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 whatever he says. That's the kind of
We'll
stuff.
create songs for your wonderful, joyous battles.
And then the
No,
healer.
Martok lost his, right? Yeah, he'll be in the song as the healer.
No, but
Yeah.
I'm just like Martok pulls off the boisterousness that I like about Klingons.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
for once we actually saw something that he is crowing about, so it works finally. Because all too often you just hear him, thumping their chest in Quark's bar or something, or across view screens. Here, you're actually seeing him cheer about our hero. And it actually feels good finally, instead of just eye rolling. Oh, stop it with this. This was like, yeah, you're there with him wanting to cheer it on. So finally it works.
It's a show don't tell thing, right?
Yeah.
So they built Klingons up for so long as these like beefy baddie dudes in TNG, but they also at every turn would have like whatever guy they wanted to look like an awesome bad guy beat up Worf. And so you get in your head that the Klingons are just all talk, right? And then here's a situation where nah, they're not just all talk.
Yeah,
And you're actually seeing it.
They invade the station, and Kira, say what you will, freedom fighter, badass. She's still a 98-pound woman. She kicks the ass of all these
Right.
Klingons, and they're all just phonies. All of
What
them.
was that, like season 2, season 3 here?
No, season 4. The beginning
Yeah,
of season 4.
So even when they attack en masse, they're always beaten.
And I don't know if you guys talked about it last week, but just the whole Martok and his one eye.
It's badass.
Yeah, I just really like that here's a scarred Klingon now who's been beaten down, and it would have been nice to maybe see Worf have a few more battle wounds from this, like going forward. I know it's a makeup artist's nightmare, but I really love the look of Martok. I thought it was fantastic.
I mean, all that's missing really.
So did your dog, apparently.
Yeah. all that's missing really is Martok needs the eye patch bolted onto his skull like Chang in Star Trek 6.
Oh, one of the best bits of prop work ever. All the little screws on that eye
Have the Klingon
patch.
logo.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
But again, this is where it could have easily been Cheeseville of a single-eyed Klingon and all that kind of stuff, but somehow it just works.
It's like magic. Speaking of magic, Garrick's in the wall again. And we're about to listen to his monologue.
I'm sorry, but that's absolutely unacceptable. I'm under enough strain as it is. I can't have you quitting on me. Get a hold of yourself, Derek. After all, you haven't had one of these attacks in years. Yes, this is a tight, enclosed space. Yes, there's not a lot of room to move, but a disciplined mind does not allow itself to be sidetracked by niggling psychological disorders like claustrophobia. Besides, this isn't like sudden death. The walls won't collapse in on you. Your friends are nearby. There's plenty of air, so there's nothing to be concerned about. Focus on the job. You're the only person who can contact the runabout. People are depending on you. Seattle's depending on you. You promised her you'd come back. And that young lady has had quite enough disappointments in her life without you adding to them. So, control yourself. You're stronger than this. A disciplined mind.
Just going to point out that that's fatherly care this young girl has had far enough. Anyway, we're going to move on from that point again.
Oh yeah, move right along from the point you're wrong about.
I don't know what you guys thought of this development of Garrick having claustrophobia, but for me, I love it because here's a character that, we've seen in the past. Nothing phases him. Everything rolls right off his back. He, even when he was on the drug addicted implant in his thing, it really he wasn't phased by it. But here, to be phased by something as quote unquote minor as claustrophobia for this, really up to now unfazable character, I think is really cool, and he acts it really well. I mean, at the beginning of that clip is kind of when he's talking to the light, it's sort of morbidly funny, but then it gets really serious.
Right, but don't forget, this is not him just in a vacuum facing this fear. It's hot off the heels of him losing his father, or who, we all assume it is. I mean, it's never for sure said.
Well, I mean, last week seemed pretty definitive about it.
Right, but it's still oblique. He wants him to admit it, so he doesn't necessarily. Either way, it's hot on the heels of him taking this emotional wound, which he covers pretty well, you would think, but he is still probably feeling that, and then this is like the thing that pushes him over the edge.
But I don't think we ever do a lot of follow-up ever again with this.
Actually, we do. We do.
Do we? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Because there's the whole thing when Esri first comes onto the station, he's experiencing it again because he keeps helping the Federation kill Cardassians in the war.
I think I don't know, it almost strains credulity a little bit in that he's this spy who would probably have to, especially Obsidian Order, like be in places where he might have to be in this situation. But then you wonder if maybe the drug that he had, the implant, would help with that.
He calls it out that this isn't like Zenketh or Zenkethi, whatever that is. It's implying that he's done something before,
like this, yeah,
tunneling under an embassy. Who the hell knows,
right?
And that it collapsed, like that
or
caused his fear.
I was gonna say he went into the trash compactor from Star Wars and got really freaked out.
Sure. So it's showing that it's at least implying that he had some sort of a trigger that caused it. He was buried alive.
That's good. Good word. That's something I wasn't connecting. All right. Also, Zenketh comes up a lot in the books. So
yeah, it does, and it was in the episode where Odo killed the other changeling. That was the pretense to get the Defiant out there.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. Did they actually win a UP for best one-off alien? And
yes, that we never
saw
see. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. So Julian has finished working on Worf. But Garrick is suddenly making a lot of noise in the wall. Julian runs in to save him, and they figure out that he has claustrophobia. But they kind of realize that they're stuck without his expertise. Whatever are they going to do? Lots of things happen on the station back on DS9 to ratchet up the tension. I'm not going to go through every single thing, but trust me, it was tense. The last of which is Dukat asking Sisko to join the Dominion. If he refuses, DS9 becomes a prime target as a piece of Cardassian space furniture that they're ready to reclaim.
I love that they're back to sparring partners because now that they're true adversaries again. Like the thing that always stuck with me was the Dukat saying, "Oh, that space station that you're sitting on that you're so fond of was built by Cardassians," and then Sisko says, "That's funny. I thought it was built by Bajoran slave labor."
Mm-hmm.
I just got a kick out of that. As soon as he has any power back, just like a typical bully, he just calls up somebody to try and lord it over. And it didn't really work all that well for him.
Well, he had already tried to lord it over Kira, and she just didn't. Remember last week we kind of had this long conversation about what was that conversation about, and was it creepy? Yeah, it was creepy because he was already trying to lord it over, and he wasn't even in power yet.
Yeah, and I liked her response to that too. If that's supposed to be a threat, I'm not impressed.
I'm not
But then
impressed.
even when he does finally get the power and he can show it off, he calls somebody who's not particularly impressed still.
Poor guy.
And I do like you. I mean, I don't know if you mentioned it last week, but when Ducat attacks Garrick on the station, I like the way that Garrick gets to him is he says that public opinion seems to be going against him because he's such a politician. So of course he cares what the public thinks of him.
He had such a great little foray of zingers in that scene. Yeah, we did talk a little bit about it. I don't know that we specifically brought that one up, but it was a great scene. Anyway, we're back with Worf, and he's got 7 battles and 7 victories. We're about to start singing some jams up in this place. But Worf is beginning to find this exercise futile. How are we getting closer to getting out? Garrick decides to go back in.
I do like his line about the verse about the Cardassian who panicked would spoil Martok's song.
A lot of good
He's gonna finish the job
one-liners.
for that very reason.
Yeah.
Sorry, Blair. Go ahead.
I was just going to say a lot of really good one-line comments throughout this episode. It was just fantastic.
Very well written.
But if you said that moment, straying credulity, before that Garrick would have this weakness, but isn't it super in his character that once he would have the break, all he would do is just go inside himself and not really go for help and just try to sort his crap out and then just come out of it at some point? That seemed perfectly right.
This was the right tone, right tenor, right character moment for him. I fully agree with that.
Very cool shot too, by the way, of him just lying motionless in the foreground, just staring wide-eyed as characters are talking behind him.
The way that they stage a lot of these scenes, and this one was directed by Les Landau, so I mean he's a veteran of these directorial things with Star Trek. He's been in all kinds of TNG ones too, right? So he knew what he was doing, man, and got everything in frame for a lot of these shots.
Right.
Outside of that one Romulan that just looked totally out of place.
that is the perfunctory prisoner that I'm talking.
That's like a red shirt in a Romulan uniform, for crying out loud. You just knew that was coming.
Oh, the one that gets shot. I thought you were talking about the woman.
Well, no, she at least played a purpose, but that other guy just standing there, you know, kind of looking goofy. And
hey, they made the Breen do something at least.
Dude,
that was cool.
That was such a great payoff. We're not there yet. We're gonna get there soon.
Fantastic.
Such a great payoff because you're like, man, I love that outfit, but are they just having it there for the outfit? Nope, they did not. Anyway,
I like how we learned also too that apparently the Breen have no blood.
How do we learn that?
Because they did the blood screenings, and then Garrick or someone who says, "Is that everyone?" And then Bashir goes, "Everyone but that Breen, no blood."
Huh.
I thought, I don't want to say what they did in the books, but I thought they were just more.
Well, in the books, the Breen are a confederation of people. They're not just one singular.
Here's the double-edged sword: is I wanted to learn more about the Breen, but I wasn't necessarily all that thrilled with what the direction they took in the book. So I'm like, you know what? I like this mysterious. We don't know anything about them better.
When they visit the planet in the Section 31 novel, it's actually really great. I love what they did with the whole thing. So that one Section 31 novel, which is the only knowledge I really have of the Breen outside of the shows, it was fun, and I would read that again and again. And I kind of liked where they took it, that they're different, a confederation of different peoples, which would make sense why he wouldn't let him take his blood in this episode. So maybe his saying of no blood doesn't mean that they actually physically have no blood, but I wasn't about to try to take blood from that dude because he'd snap my neck.
Well, the way the line was delivered, it sounded like the Breen just don't have blood, but that could be the reason. Everyone also think it's very cold on Breen, but you go in that book and it's not Iceland at all.
Life's just easier if you don't read all those books.
Yeah.
I do like the mystery comment, Matt, and I think that's probably the best way to, just look at them at this point, right? Is wow, who are they? And
because I was going to say, I think that, as infrequently as they're used in the future, I end up really loving the Breen by the end of this series.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So O'Brien comes in to check on one of Gowron's men in the med bay, but Julian has released him already, or murdered him. They discuss the war, and the Podge comes back out again when he starts talking about darts for some stupid reason. O'Brien calls him on it, And we move along. Quark comes in to earn his paycheck this week by having a quick little conversation about how terrible it would be if the Dominion ran this station. Nobody wants to have sex. Nobody wants to drink beer. Nobody wants to eat food. This would suck.
This is an awesome little conversation. It's apropos of nothing, but the Jem'Hadar don't eat, they don't drink, and they don't have sex. And if that weren't bad enough, the changelings don't eat, they don't drink, and they don't have sex either.
It's good to remind you that Ziyala's here, and she offers Quark some hope as we close this scene. Maybe the Vorta have huge sexual and alcoholic appetites. Maybe they do.
As it turns out, the Vorta can't taste, is what we later find out.
So Quark's just screwed any way you look at it if the Dominion comes in.
Don't let the Dominion take over. Back on the bridge, and Cisco's here to just let us know that Starfleet is near. Yay, thanks. The end of this episode is like bam, 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 and you're like, I didn't really need that part. Just get me to the next part. Meanwhile, Worf is about to face the sub-boss Jem'Hadar. We'll just call him Goro, even though he has an actual name that Matt said earlier. Worf's injuries are starting to catch up with him. Garrick is still stuck in the wall. And suddenly the Jem'Hadar want to get him out so they can execute him. He wants to live. He better explain where the heck this guy is. Back on DS9, and everyone is ready and accounted for. They send out their runabout, but we shift to a scene of Julian on board with the crew laid out behind him. Dun, dun, dun.
And by this point, too, the Romulans show up randomly.
No, they have not shown up yet.
Oh, they haven't shown up yet? Okay.
No, so all the stuff with the runabout happens, and then when the runabout gets out there, they start seeing when they start feeling the Jem'Hadar around, that's when the Romulans show up. Right before that is when the Romulans show up, but it comes soon.
By the way, real quick,
yeah,
when like at the beginning of the episode, and I guess here they had the runabout scramble to be part of the defense of the station. Who are the poor suckers who draw that short straw to man the runabouts during the battles?
Whew. The pawns, basically.
Is that a volunteer mission?
Well, you look at it this way. Probably they're going to be attacking the larger ships, so you may have a bit of a fighting chance. You're quicker. You hide behind all the big ships.
I don't know. That's a bum deal.
Right.
No matter how you cut it, I think.
I think it's like everyone who was the lowest on the last crew evaluation report. Those are the ones that get the runabouts.
No, that's got to be a crappy pep speech you get from one of the officers. Like, all right, volunteers. And then when nobody raises their hand.
Well, it's going to be you, Jimmy, red shirt, and you.
Is that Ferengi here yet? We enlisted him just for this kind of a role.
All right, so we're back on DS9, and O'Brien is suddenly noticing a tachyon buildup. The Romulans decloak and request the opportunity to join the fleet in a harrowing and amazing scene. Matt, how much were you loving these ship reveals?
I was going to go back to Blair. Cast your memory way back when you first watched this. Did you get excited by this? Because I remember at the time watching this going, oh my God, it's happening. And then, the episode still does blue ball it a bit. Excuse the analogy. But come on. Weren't you feeling it back then?
It was exciting.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder, though, like if the Romulans were freaked out enough by this plan to like almost wipe out their entire fleet that they later signed the treaty with the Dominion that they won't get involved at the end of the season.
It's certainly showing that the Romulans were scared, right? I mean, they're always shown to at least be really reclusive.
Right,
So,
but for them to show up just here unannounced and be willing to join the fleet is a little against what they're usually about. But then the fleet is almost wiped out by this bomb that's going to happen. So I think maybe that's the catalyst for them. Like, okay, we're just not going to get involved in this.
yeah, they stuck their neck out a little too far, which is against what they normally kind of do, I suppose. And they almost got their head chopped off because of it. So yeah, I can completely see how that would lead to the decision coming up.
Can you imagine the Senate meeting after this, too? Like, we did what you told us to do, John McCain, and here we are. We should have never taken your thumbs up as a sign that we should do it. Anyway.
Lots of bitching. Very prescient show again today.
Yeah. And also too, they're still recovering from the other half of their fleet being wiped out in the Tal Shiar attack.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is that right now though?
No, like 2 seasons ago when the Cardassians and Romulans tried to bomb the Founder homeworld.
Right. Back in the game. The Jem'Hadar are still quizzing Julian, but they're kind of sick of it. They gun down a prisoner and continue their grilling. When one Jem'Hadar figures it out, he uses the tool that he found in Julian's bed and begins to take off the wall panel. He looks in, but he doesn't see anything. Meanwhile, he turned his back on a Breen. You don't do that. The Breen manages to steal his gun, blast a couple of these fools into oblivion, and then Julian shanks the last one as the Breen gets his own comeuppance.
Can I just say, though, how cool was it that the Breen and the Jem'Hadar kill each other in mutually assured dissolution?
Just mad all over.
And I love the fact that Breen never said a word. Didn't even utter a just was totally quiet, did his thing, got vaporized. That's it.
And
Really
this is
makes
like,
the Breen look bad, eh?
Blair, you're a Walking Dead fan, right?
Absolutely.
This kind of is like that kind of a scene that you see in a little bit more modern shows occasionally, where it's all fairly calm, and then The Walking Dead does it well, where it's just all of a sudden crazy violence can happen in a split second. And this is kind of a little slow by modern standards, I suppose, and they can't be too gory, but it really is kind of a neat, very fast paced, everything went to hell in like a split second kind of a thing.
With both sides getting it, right? It just wasn't the heroes killing all the Jem'Hadar. Like, they took casualties there. It's similar to, like you said, in The Walking Dead, like everybody, no one's safe in that show. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously we're not having main characters or whatever get blown off, but it's definitely cool. You don't see this individual, like, 2-second scene, rather, basically. You don't see that in Star Trek too often.
And just to segue for Chris to keep going, now that they've killed the Jem'Hadar, they're really on the move now because they have to get the stuff done before the Jem'Hadar notice that they're missing.
So in rapid pace. Meanwhile, we switch over to Worf real fast. He refuses to yield, and finally the Jem'Hadar, who has grown to respect Worf, yields. The Vorta orders them both shot right now, as Garrick finally gets the transporter to work and beams them all onto the runabout. Runabout. I apologize to our Canadian overlords.
But I like how they do end up shooting the Jem'Hadar who yields. Like, he's gone.
But Worf made it out.
That is a neat thing, because we are kind of showing that the Jem'Hadar aren't entirely mindless, and they aren't also entirely under control, which is always kind of an interesting thing. They're kind of a trained wild animal.
Right. We're showing it again, right? Because we've seen this before. This doesn't strain credulity here because we've definitely seen them.
Yeah, definitely in the Iconian Gateway one.
Right.
And did we get some feedback regarding that some people didn't like, that they can have a little bit of a thought to themselves? I kind of remember maybe somebody not liking that because it takes away their impact as just a force of nature.
No, I think it makes them more interesting, quite honestly,
because they're still a force of nature and they might bite you.
Right.
So.
They'll do what you say up to a point, and if you like,
they will bite the hand that feeds them, right?
Yes, yeah.
Essentially,
I think that makes them more dangerous.
And interesting as a villain. Like, they're not one note, Yep. Anyway. Meanwhile, with Worf,
if you just have like the soldiers that like are just a force of nature, then you just have the Borg again. And I like how they really try to differentiate that the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion are not the Borg.
You have the Borg or you have the droid army. You never had to worry that the droid army was going to turn on anybody in any movie ever. Unless somebody else got the codes, right? Which, whatever. It's all stupid. These guys they have minds. They're naturalized beings, whether they're cloned or created or whatever. They're not machines. Anyway. Meanwhile, oh, wait, we already read that. Worf looks to Garrick and says simply, "You did well." Garrick responds, "So did you." And puddles of tears hit my desk. According to O'Brien, they're surrounded by Jem'Hadar, but none are nearby. They get a message out of the wormhole from Julian, and then they track back his last location, and Sisko tells the Defiant, "You better go after the Yukon." Turns out this was all a clever ruse to make the sun go supernova and cripple the fleet before the war even begins.
Now, Matt, as bad as like the reaction shot from Julian, changeling Julian right before he dies is, I do like the visual effects of the Defiant warping in system and stopping just enough to catch the Might tractor beam really quickly. I thought that was a nice bit of. It looks like it's CGI, but it looks like it's good CGI.
Yeah, it is, and it's anytime they bring in sun effects in science fiction movies or TV shows, it's awesome. Like the sun effects in Star Trek Generations when they're near that, and just the different lighting on the ship. Oh, yeah. It's all good. It's like cheapy, easy mode. It makes things look cool and different.
And they managed to warp within a system without creating a motion picture wormhole.
The thing I like about this scene, not so much the special effects that you guys are, so pleased about, but I just like, again, watching it from the first time, I was fooled about what their plan was. I honestly thought they were coming, and within reason, because obviously it was a 43-minute show or whatnot. But
right.
I didn't see I just love the deceitfulness, the long term. This would have taken a lot of planning to ensure that the Klingons were there, and heck, the Romulans. That's just a bonus.
Yeah, this is the biggest game of chess that's ever been played in Star Trek.
Yeah, and yeah, you know what? It failed, but you could almost see them going, "Wow, we were lucky there."
I mean, but had Julian not escaped and sent the message at that exact moment, it would have worked. It would have.
Yeah,
worked.
Absolutely. Yeah, a little ham-fisted, but still, I'm okay with it, because this was a two-parter that didn't seem like a two-parter per se. It just felt like a
one long story.
One long story. That's exactly how I would put it. Yeah.
But a really good long story. Like, I mean, I know we're about to get to final thoughts, but I was not let down this second half of this week. But I'm curious to see what you guys think.
I have one more question. I don't know if it comes up in the clip or anything left in Chris's notes, but it clearly, I think Dukat knew what this plan was, right? Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting turn to his character, because for so long he was willing to kill tons of Bajorans, right? But he always wanted to be their hero and to be perceived as their savior and protector and all that. But something's changed in him where he's kill them all.
To even include his daughter, like the fact that conversation happens and all he has to say was Zial made her choice.
But the difference here, or I think the key important thing, is he's still doing this to be loved. It's just now he wants to be loved by his own people.
Right. Before that, he never had the power to do that. So it's he was settling for the love of the people that he could.
Yes. But now he is the man for his own people.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't he say they're building statues of him or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's getting exactly what he wanted all along.
Your mic's on. You're muted, genius.
Throwing in the genius really makes you feel like an asshole. I'm just gonna throw that out and just playing.
You just were rambling on and on, not even realizing it.
I said 2 words. I said, "Well, we get." Anyway, we get the Breakfast Club close to finish out this episode, tidying up all the little stray strands of story that they don't want to deal with in later episodes. So here's our final clip.
Be back.
We never doubted it.
"4 weeks. Are you telling me I've been hanging around the changeling for over a month and you never even suspected it wasn't me?" No. The worst part is the clues were right in front of me. What clues? Well, for one thing, he was a lot easier to get along with.
So I suppose this means you want your Klingon opera collection back.
Intact.
More or less.
it's settled, in light of the new treaty and the continued Dominion threat to the Alpha Quadrant, there will be a permanent Klingon military presence on this station.
But I choose the commander.
Agreed.
Mr. Worf thinks very highly of you, General.
I think very highly of him.
Then I can't think of a better man for the job, if you'll take it.
I would be honored.
Ops to Cisco.
Cisco here.
You're receiving an incoming message. It's from Ducat.
Well, Captain, I must congratulate you. If that proto-matter device had gone off inside the sun, well, the death toll would have been enormous.
And your daughter would have been one of the casualties.
Zial made her choice. As far as I'm concerned, she's no longer my daughter.
You know, Ducat, I thought you'd changed in the last 5 years. I see I was wrong.
One man's villain is another man's hero, Captain. You should see the monument they're erecting in my honor at the gateway to the Imperial Plaza.
Is that why you sold out your people to the Dominion? For a monument?
What I did to make Cardassia strong again.
It came awful
And mark my
close
words,
to that
Captain, I
phrase.
succeeded. You may have escaped defeat this day, but tomorrow,
We will see about tomorrow.
yes, we will.
If I could just say a few things there, guys, just to start it off with that litany of little scenes there. A couple things. First off, I think it would have been better with the Bashir O'Brien scene if maybe Bashir was trying on his new uniform, because this is the first time he gets to try the new grays on. I think that kind of would have been kind of cool. Second, the Martok being assigned as the general for the area or the commander for the area. Again, really like that scene showing the humble side of a Klingon instead of a loud, boisterous, of course I should be the guy. And the third thing I think would have added to that whole scene between Ducat and Cisco is if Cisco was just sitting there flipping his baseball, up in the air around, because we know that that's a prominent thing for later down the season, that ball remains in that station for quite some time.
Yeah.
So just a few observations on that.
And when it doesn't remain there, we know it's bad. Really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Smonsky and I kind of talked about the outfit last week, and one of the things that we mentioned was that it would have been much better if they just had Julian in prison in the Greys, because then you could believe that there had been enough time that he didn't necessarily get caught before the Odo thing or whatever else happened, and some of the other things that we question about whether the Changeling would have really allowed this if he had just had the Greys on in prison. So that's an interesting thought, that you wanted to see him trying out the Greys for the first time, when that's also a potential.
Well,
I
I
mean,
think,
but because they didn't do it that way,
it just leaves this gaping plot hole in their story.
And I'm still grossed out by the Dax and Worf reunited. I don't want them back together.
That was a little yucky. Like, come on, get a room.
I didn't think it was yucky. I thought it was
anyways.
actually great. I love Worf. He was redeemed in this episode. He came back. They're in love, and maybe they're going to change their relationship because of
this was the kind of Worf Dax stuff that I liked.
He's been redeemed as a cool character. He still is crappy as a emotionally abusive boyfriend.
But
I don't know, man. Maybe this changed him. Maybe this whole trip changed him.
I'm also going to say I think he does redeem himself in that arena too. Certainly by that change of heart episode where he fails the mission to save her.
We'll see. But no,
he did say, "Where are my Klingon operas?" So
I know, but that's just following up on the joke from last episode that she's
Yeah.
prone to lose things.
One might also argue that it's consistent character being a crap person.
I only care about my operas.
I mean,
care about you.
I agree with you for that Ryza episode, but you're just finding things to find things.
I don't know that he is. Honestly, like if we talk about reality, let's just make a comparison here. I'm going off to battle. My wife says to me jokingly as I leave, "I'm going to borrow your favorite CDs," and I'm probably going to say, "Yeah, babe, listen to them. I hope that helps you get through this time because it's going to be a struggle." I'm not saying, "Don't you lose." I'm not going to brood and then say, "Don't you lose my CD," because I can replace the CD. He can replace a Klingon opera.
Yeah,
he can probably go online and find it in 5 seconds.
What happens if it's this nice classic car? I'm going to borrow your car while you're off.
But
Hey,
it's not
don't you scratch my
That's
car.
not what they went with, though. It's not like they could have done that because they had the Defiant, and she could have easily said, "I'm gonna bunk up here in the Defiant." That's not what they did. They went with CDs, and so it's just poor writing to begin with.
It's a hop, skip, and not much of a jump to why isn't dinner ready? As soon as he gets back, it just
hungry.
is. I'm sorry.
What kind of
garbage person?
Yeah, it's like it's a 20-foot hop and a 3-yard jump. Maybe.
Not really. Not really. It's
Worf is terrible, but I feel like he's redeemed. In my mind, I can headcanon that he went on this trip and he realized, you know what, I'm gonna make this joke when I get back. I got this joke all lined up, but then I'm gonna say I'm just kidding, I don't care, and give her a huge hug. So that's what he did when the cameras weren't on.
Yeah, because that's what I do. I spend a couple weeks beating people to death with my bare fist, and I'm just thinking of just really crappy jokes to give to my girlfriend when I get back.
Oh, you're just salty.
No, it's a garbage relationship, and it's toxic for the both of them.
It has been a garbage relationship, but they're gonna redeem it.
Except in the next season, when they are actually husband and wife.
They're gonna grow into it. I can see this happening.
Yeah, they're going to redeem it with more violent sex in a few moments. Yeah, because beating people to death again.
That's
really,
just
you know what? As long as they have a safe word, Matt, they can do whatever they want.
And it's consensual.
Yeah, it's consensual. So I'm gonna stop you there, man.
Hey,
Who
as
are
long as
Who
they
are
keep
you?
getting up and hitting the bedpost at the end, right? At the end, all right.
50 Shades of Klingon will not be judged by you, sir. He shakes his head. We're done, man. That's it. Let's go into final thoughts and ratings. I'm gonna let Matt Hansen go first since he's coming back from Vegas and on a super high.
Yeah, so I love this two-parter. I think that this is one of those that bucks the trend of the second half is usually kind of a letdown. I didn't feel let down at all. I feel like this is 2 hours of solid DS9 at its best. All the pieces are pretty much in place now. We're ready for war at this point. So the fact that we're getting toward that is really exciting. The fact that we're fleshing out our secondary cast with Martok and a few others coming in is awesome. And I love the character development of this episode. So this is going to be another 5-star for me. And the whole arc is a 5-star. It's really probably one of DS9's best 2-part stories up to this point.
Let's just keep going completely in reverse. Smonsky, you ready?
Sure. And are we doing the arc?
I think we're doing one for this episode,
we usually,
one for the arc. Yeah.
Yeah, we usually do that when we do the 2-parters.
All right. So I do think this is actually a step back from the previous episode in the 2-parter, because how can you beat the high of that cliffhanger of last week of the invasions happening? And you look at the end of this one, it's still strong, but like I said, there is a bit of like it's not going through yet. It's not really going through yet. And then you're like, oh, next week. And then you see the preview and it's maybe kind of a lighthearted episode with Dr. Bashir and holograms. So there is that little bit of like the emotion went so high last week. This is almost as high, but kind of bringing it down a little. So I can't quite say this is as good as last week's. That said, it's still really strong. I like the Great Escape kind of parallels, and they rescued what could easily be the most cliched type of episode ever and make it pretty dang good through good characters, or at least the sides of characters that we really like. And then just like the rush and thrill of seeing all these ships start to show up. And from here on out, you never see the station without tons of ships around it. This episode just built the universe up between the two. So yes, it's not as good as last week, but it's a weaker 5-star than what it was last week. And this is the tipping point of the show. We've seen that kind of before, but there is no going back from this one. So this is a real paradigm shift in Deep Space Nine. So how could you give an episode that important any less than 5-star for both of them?
And I was going to say, Matt, I think that it would just be hard to, because I know what you mean, that last cliffhanger was so high, but I respect the fact that it's not resolved by the end of this episode, because that would have felt like a cheap Voyager rush to the finish.
Well, I'm not arguing that has
They
to be
already rushed.
Well, yeah, but I'm not arguing that it has to be resolved. It's just that it's not. You would think there would be another ratchet up.
Well,
in fact, it's a big ratchet back. So it's just kind of a weird, jarring kind of a feeling.
I don't know. For me, the fact that an Alpha Quadrant power has formally joined the Dominion, and now that the Dominion have a foothold, an actual foothold in the Quadrant, I think that that's an appropriate step up. But
it is, and this is not necessarily the fault of this episode. It's the next 10 episodes or whatever we get that before it gets a next jump up. The next, and this is where if this was a series 15 years later or whatever, you would be getting the arguments of should the Federation be doing a preemptive strike? Because it's the fates. We all know what's going to happen. Starfleet's not that dumb. So it's just like, and that's why I'm not going to hurt this episode for it. It's just kind of funny that this amazing story is now on hold.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just a victim of the storytelling at the time. If this was today, Call to Arms would be the next episode.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Or if this was Babylon 5, Call to Arms would have been the next episode. Moving on. I'm going to go next. This was a great ending to a fantastic little story arc. They set into motion all the political games that are going to carry us through the end of the entire show run. They built in Garrick with this mutual respect angle, which was really cool and good to see. And I made a joke about crying puddles of tears, but it was earned through 2 episodes of really good work, where we start with them just not even be able to. They could care less about one another, and then we end with respecting each other. Huge movement in character, and I believe it was Ben who said there's no movement in character in all of these stories. So, Ben, do your research, son. Moving on. These episodes are great. Both of them are fantastic. Full boat on both of them. Full boat as a thing. This is 5 out of 5. Fearless foes of founders flaunting freedom felicitously. Blair?
And that takes it to you, Blair, which I'm curious, like, what did you think when this episode wrapped up at the time, and what do you think of it now, knowing what this episode sets up?
I think at the time, anticipation would be the word that I would use for this type of for how they wrapped this up was, wow, what are we about to get into? And if we're going 7 seasons of DS9 like they did TNG, we've got a lot of great stuff ahead of us. Looking back on it now, I still, you can't really use the word anticipation, but in some ways you can, because I anticipated this episode and I love this story arc, and I don't want to call it a 2-parter because I think you put it best, Hanson, when you said this is great storytelling. This is a story, and for me, I was eagerly anticipating reviewing this episode, but you know me, I'm a huge continuity fan. I love world building, and this set the seeds. I absolutely loved the first story part, I guess you could say. I love this episode. It's great to see Martok. He's going to be entrenched moving forward, knowing that war is on the horizon, and and I'm talking about war in a fictional sense, not in real life, but I'm the phasers and photon torpedoes type of guy, right? We never saw that in TNG. We saw very static battles. This is the first time we are really going to see the Federation really go hardcore into a war. This is we keep saying this is where DS9 that's good. Yeah, this is another one of those points where it gets good. And I guess the last point I'd like to say, and I've already mentioned it a couple times, but this is another set of stories where Bashir is really earning himself very, very strong consideration for MVP of the season.
Now, of course, you're referring to the real one.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's correct. Not the pseudo Fako Bashir and his poor acting chops. But yeah, overall, this was a fantastic. If you want me to give the arc, I give it the first part 5. I give the arc 5, and I give this episode 5.0. Great escape parallels.
So I guess we enter this as our first all across the board 5-star 2-parter.
Sure, which looks like it.
Which is awesome. I love it, and yeah, this is all to quote Q from Q Who when he takes the Enterprise out to see the Borg. The hall has been rented. The orchestra engage. It's now time to see if we can dance. And so, like, I can't wait for the end game of the Dominion War to start coming toward the end of the season, because now we're in the back half, so we're getting there.
This is where you wanted to be when you signed on. When you signed
Oh,
on
yeah.
a little late in the game, you were like, I'm not going to do another podcast. And then you were like, 4 episodes in, I really want to do this podcast.
How do I not want to do the DS9 podcast when the last 2 seasons are the Dominion War?
Here we are.
So I'm really excited. And with that, we're going to move on to our feedback section. And thank you again, as always, for the feedback. We enjoy hearing from you, and there are a number of ways to get a hold of us. You can reach us at up2podcast@gmail.com, leave a comment on the forums at forum.trekfamily.com, follow us on Twitter at UP2podcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. Also, too, we always appreciate 5-star iTunes reviews that help get the word out there about the show. As we go into the 1.5 most exciting years of this series. So we really do appreciate it, and thank you for that. You can also reach us personally on Twitter. I am at mhansen0207, HANSEN, talking about all things nerdy, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel. Probably over the next month, you're going to see a lot of anticipation from me for Star Trek Discovery, which is coming on September 24th. I'm really thrilled that Trek's coming back. So if you want to talk about that and anything else, find me on Twitter.
I'm also on Twitter at CarnivoreJ, and I am supposed to be doing Golden Girls Saucy GG reviews, but I hit a little snag because I found out that one of my favorite pro wrestlers is also a huge fan of Golden Girls. So I'm currently in kind of a small Twitter campaign to get him to live review an episode of Golden
Saucy
Girls
GG.
with me. Hashtag Saucy GG. That's how we get down. So I'm trying to talk him into doing it with me. So if you could just go retweet that tweet. If you're a follower, you don't have to follow me. Just retweet that tweet and make it happen, people. Anyway,
your account sure helped you.
Smonsky is currently sounding like a mech, so we're gonna
drop out and come back in.
And I can be found at Medic1849, where similar to Hansen, once Star Trek Discovery gets up and going, I will be certainly tweeting very actively, I think. And I'm not much of a tweeter, but I can also be found following you, following me, or World Cup qualifying. That is in high gear, and with the anticipation of the World Cup coming up next summer.
I think you're real tweet, Blair. Smonsky, you want to try it again?
No. But I can be found at ProSub0 for general nerdiness and goofiness. And 3D printing.
That's still
So
happening.
fun. It's definitely fun to see what 3D thing he has come up with this week.
Is he going to make 3D action figures of all the UP2 cast members?
No.
Sponsky? Oh, come on. I need my own action figure.
It's all Judge Dredd stuff, basically.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us this week for our discussion on By Inferno's Light and this awesome, awesome two-parter. Join us next week when the Bashir bombshells keep dropping as we find out about our good doctor's past in Dr. Bashir, I presume.
This is Blair from Ontario, Canada. Until next time.
Fire and Fury. This is Chris in South Carolina.
I'm Matt in Buffalo, and go punch a Nazi.
And this is Matt from Arizona. Closing hailing frequencies, docking clamps are open, and you are cleared for departure.